Judy in WRPB Studios. So you guys have been with me a long time and know some of the shows I've had on. And we used to have a program called Divorce Connection Network. And she was a mediator. It was down in Boca. But up here, we really haven't touched on divorce and mediation. So with me is Philip Castrovinci.
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yes, sir, you did. Good
I'm
job.
old, so I don't always remember. All right, so how long have you been around the industry?
I've been working in the legal field in primarily divorce and family law firms for a little bit over a decade at this point.
All right, why did you choose that path?
So-
I'm going to just tell you, when my daughter was going to college and she wanted to be an entertainment attorney, and a good friend of mine who's an entertainment attorney said, no, have her go into either PI or divorce. Those are two things that will always make money.
yes.
So why did you go into divorce and mediation?
As common as a lot of us wound up in this industry, I'm actually a second generation attorney doing it. My father had his own firm up on Long Island for a little over 30 years that he focused primarily on divorce and family law as well.
Okay.
And so when I decided to go to law school, because this is 18-year-old me would never have guessed that I'd be sitting here in a suit doing an interview discussing my law, my law
And I
firm.
get that because I sit on like 4 boards, and every time they ask me, I say, no, it's okay. And I say, why? They say, it's an honor. I say, because then I have to get dressed up. All right, so you get into this family thing, and my biggest thought about it is it's sometimes got to be tough.
Yeah. Oh, it's very. I tell people, in the way I look at it, I'm meeting people either at their emotional lowest or on their way down. You know, nobody gets excited when they have to call with their family law attorney, or even less excited when you get a call from the family law attorney. And so I try and make sure, and one of the things that I focus on in my practice is never forgetting that. You know, I try and make sure that my clients are not just a number in a book. You know, I understand when I'm dealing with them, again, I'm dealing with families, either forming, whether it's an adoption or unfortunately being torn apart. And that's something that, like I said, I know truly is frustrating, difficult. Nobody gets married with the plan to get divorced. Nobody has a child with somebody wanting to go to court to fight about timesharing and stuff like that. And so I try and focus very hard on never forgetting that what I'm dealing with.
I think Judge Judy says it perfectly. And I don't know if I'll quote it right, but basically she says, the whole idea is to love your kids more than you hate each other.
Exactly.
Okay? And that's a shame because you've already took some wedding vows.
Yeah.
You already now have a child. It doesn't always, because my first divorce didn't get nasty. And we both knew that we had a daughter, and she was part of our life, and we had to be there and work that out.
Yeah.
And we were blessed, and that we never had those issues. But it's so much more than just you're going this way and I'm going that way.
Yeah.
Okay? There's so many pieces to it, even if it's simple. Is that correct?
And that's basically what I tell people when I'm doing consults, if we're talking about a case, that 99.9% of them should be settled and resolved. There shouldn't be a need to go into a courtroom and fight. Now, I've had lots of experience doing that, and that's one of the things I feel that, unfortunately, it's often being driven by emotions. Somebody's angry, somebody's upset, somebody's vengeful, and they're less focused on what's best for the overall picture, and it becomes about winning. And that's why it's very difficult, as you said, that it can become very emotionally draining on people.
Right.
And I tell clients all the time that, unfortunately, me and you can only control 49% of the speed and cost of this case. Because if I'm representing you and you make a very reasonable offer, but she is very angry, she's not taking it. So I can't settle that for you, and unfortunately that has to go to court. And going to court to litigate, fight, have a judge get involved, that's what tends to increase the cost and make it take much longer.
What's interesting is, like I said, there's a bunch of pieces to it.
Yeah.
And I guess the length of time that together is going to be an issue because you've accumulated a bunch of stuff. And I know it sounds ridiculous because I'm older and I'm trying to get rid of stuff now. Okay, they're trying to keep as much as they can. Okay, do you believe that the society or the way it's run in this country and maybe other countries is that if there's children involved, it's almost always going to favor the woman?
That is certainly something that is shifting, and if that was the basis for that, as I understand it, was a little bit of, well, dad went to work, mom stayed home and took care of the kids in the house.
Right.
And so now that the marriage or your relationship is breaking up, there becomes a question, well, who benefits more from changing that? Because yes, it's important for a father to be involved with a child's life, but who's actually going to benefit if now the child's routine is completely changed to give dad time sharing? Now, one of the benefits, some people consider it a benefit, some not, is recently, as of July of last year, the law changed down here in Florida as it relates to time sharing. There's now what's called a rebuttable presumption of 50-50 time sharing. Now, I can tell you, practicing up in New York and down here, most judges had kind of an idea of that. Came in with a, why shouldn't I give equal time sharing to both parents?
Right.
And so, but the common fight would have been, well, dad's not involved or the breadwinner's not involved, he doesn't know. And so there's definitely a change as far as now how the courts view that. I believe also as society, as now both parents are having to work, there's definitely a societal shift in, again, where it was much more common, the traditional family household where dad went to work, mom stayed home, now either out of necessity or just decisions, that's no longer the case.
So, where it was for us stupid people like me, it was like, well, I'm the mom and I'm taking care of this child constantly, and you're at work. But now it's not like that. Now you're at work, I'm at work, so in that scenario, it's the child that's really suffering.
Yeah.
Even in a regular relationship, because you don't have full-time mom or full-time dad anymore.
Correct. And
So that becomes like very, very difficult. And I think you put the children in a bad spot.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's very unfortunate that oftentimes the children are being used either as weapons or being used to pass the information, or like as you were saying, it was hard enough trying to make it work as an intact family unit. Now that
Right.
we have two separate households trying to support and raise children, they got to go to work. There's very rare situations where people have been together long enough, and then as a result of either alimony or child support, that allows one of the parents to continue staying home. And that tends to be another fight that happens all the time.
Right.
Whereas, the men constantly complain that, well, why does she get the time with the kid? And then again, as it was just, in the past, and then the person receiving support, because that was another drastic change that occurred, is Florida got rid of permanent alimony. There used to be a permanent alimony statute that allowed, depending upon the length of time and some other reasons, that no longer exists anymore. So there was a bit of a drastic change that occurred in the last year or so as it relates to both the alimony situation, spousal support, and then time sharing as well. And I definitely believe both of those ultimately were positive changes.
Well, I would think, I hate to say it looking from the man's side, but permanent alimony, was it permanent alimony or permanent alimony until the other person got married?
No, it was basically, you could have caveats in there. But yes, it was usually permanent alimony.
Whether they got married or didn't get married?
Yes, if you could then prove essentially the, what's the term that the courts like to use, a supportive relationship, that could impact it. And that's also been strengthened a little bit now, that it used to be kind of a standard of, well, were they married or not? Now there's other variables the court can look at, such as things like, well, are they living together? Do they have shared bills? Things along those lines.
So, I guess the recommendation is always to go through mediation.
Absolutely. Oh yes, and like I said, I have litigated in many different trial courts throughout this state, throughout New York, and one of the things, especially when you're dealing with children, is if you have to go and do a time-sharing trial or a parental responsibility hearing, which is who actually decides and makes major decisions, the chances of the two parents being able to sit together at graduation or go, be at the same house for a senior prom and stuff like that are slim and none.
That's terrible.
Because the unfortunate aspect is somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose.
Right.
And so the loser's not just going to take that lying down. So that's then going to create post-judgment or appeals actions, which is just going to increase costs, increase time. Oh no, I truly believe that the best scenarios are ones that are settled, and you as the parents take the parenting plan that the court issues and the court signs off on anytime you're dealing with children, and you take that parenting plan, you put it in the desk somewhere and never look at it again.
Right, which would be ideal scenario.
Exactly.
You know, I always talk about relationships, and people think in relationships you should compromise, but my philosophy is relationships to be successful, you should negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay, because if you compromise, someone's getting everything,
Yep.
and the other person's getting nothing. At least if you negotiate, both parties get something.
Yeah.
So I would think it's going to be similar in mediation.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. Usually, what I tell people going in there is you're exactly right. If you walk out there thinking you're getting everything you want, we're wasting our time. And I hope your spouse's or your ex's attorney is advising him or her the same thing as well. Any lawyer who's worth anything will tell you if both parties leave a negotiation table a little unsatisfied or felt that they maybe gave up, usually that's the sign of a pretty good deal. And so, because again, it's if one person walks out of that skipping all happy, the other person's gonna think
Miserable.
what happened here.
Right,
So,
they'll be
yeah.
miserable.
So yeah, it's one
Right.
of those that we take on as the attorneys, that if both parties are walking out a little frustrated with us as, oh, you should have gotten me more, should have gotten me that usually it's a sign it's a pretty good deal. Which again, they get annoyed with us for.
Okay, so let's take a non-contested divorce.
Okay.
Simple?
Oh yeah. It's gets a little bit more complicated if kids are involved.
Right.
But oh yeah, if there are no children involved, then it's very simple to go forward. Depending upon the situation, even now they allow for things which you can waive certain financial disclosure. And that basically removes a lot of cost and expense associated with it. Now, that's something that I would speak very in detail with my client about, because I can't, if we're waiving financials, I have very little ability to tell you, yes, this is a good, this is a bad thing.
Right. Right.
And so I try to practice that way. If we're going to be doing that, okay, so basically everybody's walking away with what they came in. You guys, there isn't a long-term marriage or a long-term relationship. You don't have commingled assets. You don't have property in each other's names where it's going to become complicated. Because there's a little bit of, well, if the two of you could work all of these things out, why get divorced? And so, yes, it can be done if both people are willing to, what I like to call, play nice together in the sandbox, where there's a bit of honesty, there's a bit of disclosure, and people care more about being done and divorced as opposed to finding out and seeing if they can get every dollar they may be entitled to.
Well, if you're doing that, then it's going to be brutal to get on with your own life.
Yes.
One of the interesting things that I found out, and I didn't know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if someone gets cheated on, that doesn't affect the divorce
Well, there's
financially.
another recent change in the law
Okay.
is that now that does have an impact.
Oh, it does?
The best way to explain that is how people feel as if, oh, how does this have no impact on anything?
Right.
One of the things people want to bring that up in is have and get divorced on the basis or have grounds for divorce. The common thing or common grounds that we use, because it is still a lawsuit, so there still has to be a legal basis to get divorced. We essentially use, it's called a no-fault divorce, which is that it's an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. That you guys, it's just over. Now, the benefit of doing that is is somebody just needs to say, yes, this marriage is over, and now you're legally entitled to a divorce. And the reason I say it's easier to do that way is because if you say you want to go after it on, say, somebody was unfaithful, you have to prove that before you can get a divorce, which just adds an extra layer of difficulty to the case.
And expense.
Exactly. But one thing they did do, because there used to be previously, you could use it by way of showing what's called a dissipation of assets. And what that means is, just briefly, that Florida, like New York was, which made an easy transition for me, is they're both equitable distribution states. And so the marital property is divided equitably. That doesn't mean equally. And so if somebody was unfaithful and took a girlfriend or a boyfriend to a trip down to the Keys and used marital money to pay for that, I could argue that that's a dissipation of assets because it wasn't used to benefit the marriage.
Right.
And try and get some of that back. Now, there's a cost-benefit analysis of doing that. You know, how much of my time are you willing to pay for to try and fight and get back how much was spent on that? However, though, as I was saying, the law again changed to increase now that infidelity can be used or is a variable to be looked at when you're dealing with alimony. So it's not necessarily looked at as a basis for the divorce,
Right.
but if somebody was unfaithful, if, again, going back to it, if a man who had a good business is unfaithful, then the wife now in the dissolution can use that as an argument for why an alimony number should maybe be higher or be for a longer period of time than if that wasn't involved.
Interesting. Okay, we're getting to the top of our time. I wanted to ask you this one other question before we get this to an end, but forget marriage, domestic partners, okay? So my brother and his girlfriend are in a domestic partnership. Is that like a legal thing?
No, Florida doesn't recognize common law marriage.
Okay.
And common law marriage is what some states where if you've been living together for 20 years, share everything, you know, share bills, share bank accounts, you're married for all intents and purposes other than you went to court and got a marriage license. Florida doesn't recognize that. So no matter how long or what type of relationship is, if you're not legally married, the law considers you to be strangers. So unless there's a child, and even if there's a child, it doesn't rise it to the level of a marriage.
Interesting.
It's just legal strangers.
So basically, there's no real, even though you hear it all the time, there's really no domestic partnership.
No.
Oh, it's interesting. All right, so I'm going to tell you this, and not because he's an attorney, but because it's what I believe and what I always believe. Getting divorced, first of all, from all the things I've done interview-wise down south, is really about mediation, because that's going to be the best way you're going to be able to deal with it. So that's one. Part two of that is, it's not something that you go to YouTube to figure out how to do, okay? Divorce is a serious thing,
Yes.
and there are a lot of issues, and there's some, like she did her own show once a week. I had a forensic accountant, I guess.
Yep.
Okay? And also there was a play put on called Divorce Party. I had the one who wrote that, and there's a game. There's just all these little pieces. It's like unbelievable that it just is not as simple. I was lucky. My first marriage, we got divorced. It cost us $200 to get divorced because we didn't argue about anything. My child support was $260-something a month, and my ex married a race car driver who had a ton of money, so I was starting a new business, and I was falling behind, and my daughter came to live with me for a year, and my ex went into court and said, "No, I want to stop child support because she's with." It wasn't me. I was still paying it or trying to pay it. It was her, because we knew that our daughter meant everything, more than the stuff that we had or where we were going with it. But it's so important. And like I say a million times, use a professional, otherwise you're going to be miserable. It's going to cost you 5 times more money in the long run, and 100 times more, in this case, in frustration. Phil, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute
Everybody,
pleasure.
check them out, and we'll be right back. Want to go see what you did?